It's actually hurting her.
Oh my God.
What is she gonna do to you?
It's not even
remote. God.
FYI, it's not even remote.
But she's hurting her.
They arrested me in the parking lot for not wearing a mask.
Where's my...
In the parking lot.
Good.
Thank you.
That's what it's
I
about.
thought my camera was recording, but it wasn't. Tell me just by
Still in my wrist. Look at what you're doing. Can you just pull the cuff up? Pull the cuff up a bit. Yes, pull it up.
Would you like us to stand you back up?
Holy shit, look
What the fuck?
What the That's brutal. I told you it wasn't moving.
The officer then took me and we drove away. My youngest son standing there crying, not knowing not knowing why they were taking me because I had done nothing wrong. And of course, because I watched that on my son's face, it put me into a huge panic attack.
Miranda was illegally and arbitrarily arrested and detained. She was denied her right to counsel, and worse, she was subjected to cruel and unusual punishment at the hands of these two officers. She was physically abused, and this was a complete disgrace. The good news is justice has been served.
Warning, censorship. Warning, censorship.
Today I'm bringing you a good news story that I have been working on sort of in the background of everything else for months and months. And because I've been working on this story for so darn long, you're going to see my hair change, my clothes change multiple times. Now, the good news for this family was only made possible through your generous donations to fightthefines.com. Now, for those of you who don't know, and at this point, I don't know how you couldn't. Fight the Fines is a civil liberties project where top criminal and civil litigators are put in touch with people who need help fighting lockdown tickets, lockdown summonses, and sometimes even lockdown criminal charges. And this is done at no cost to the victim of the lockdown through a partnership with the registered Canadian charity, the Democracy Fund, and, like I mentioned, through your crowdfunding donations. And Miranda Gassier, well, she's one of those people who ended up with an atrocious criminal charge after taking her son to the local pool. The 43-year-old Lloydminster, Saskatchewan mom of 3 has disabilities of her own, yet she was taking her youngest, who is just 7, to swimming lessons, wherein she ended up in a dispute with another woman over Miranda's mask exemption. The swimming lessons, though, are outside, so the only time the exemption would even be necessary or matter would be near the change rooms. The whole affair culminated with peace officers showing up and flattening her in the parking lot in front of her kids before charging her criminally. And she was seriously injured in her arrest. And then in the fallout of the arrest, you can hear how she's been basically ostracized in her community. So first, you're going to hear the horrible story from Miranda. And you'll be able to hear just how truly traumatized she was. I talked to her this past summer while we got her lawyer, Chad Williamson from Williamson Law, working hard to get her out from under these criminal charges. So get ready, because you're going to be on an emotional ride. You're going to be angry and upset after hearing what happened to Miranda. But then you're going to hear from her really great lawyer, Chad Williamson, about how he was able to win, how he was able to help Miranda have these charges dropped. So first, here's Miranda.
Can you at least lift her up? She has a medical condition with her back.
If she's going to cooperate, we'll let her up. Absolutely.
She will. Just let her up.
Get up and knock your feet again.
Mom, listen to me.
Mom, calm down.
Get this. My wrist is broken. My wrist is broken.
3 sets of handcuffs on you, man.
Yeah, and this one. Look at this. Look at this. Look at this. It's not even moving.
You have to
There's
listen
scars
to
on it.
It's not
We've
gonna
given you
help.
3 sets of handcuffs, all right? Where
Let
your hands are
go at me.
all right?
Let go at me now.
If you calm
Let
down,
go of me.
Mom,
if you calm down, sweetheart, it'll be better for you, I promise. You just gotta listen to what they say, and then it'll get.
My wrist is broken right now.
I know, but you know what?
Would
There's
you like us to
nothing.
get EMS to roll? You want us
My
to get an
wrist
ambulance?
is broken.
Would you like us to get an ambulance for you?
Look at that. It's not moving, you. It's not moving. My wrist is trapped.
Can you at least loosen it just a bit, please?
Why would you take a handcuff off when she's asking what she is?
Jeez.
What am I gonna do?
Can you not loosen it while keeping it
You just
on?
tried to kick me if
I
you want.
did not.
I have a camera. Multiple cameras watching.
Ow!
It's actually hurting
Oh my
her. What is she gonna do to you?
It's not even
Oh my
remote.
God.
FYI, it's not even remote.
But she's hurting her.
They arrested me in the parking lot for not wearing a mask.
Where's my?
In the parking lot.
Good.
Thank you.
That's what it's
I
about.
thought my camera was recording, but it wasn't. Call me just vibrating.
For FYI, we
Still
have
in
one
my
thing on
wrist.
the
Look
ground.
at what you're doing. Can you just pull the cuff up?
Okay.
Pull the cuff up a
up?
bit. Yes, pull
Listen,
it up. Just
Would you like us to
Oh,
stand you back up?
Holy shit, look
What
what
the
you fucking
fuck?
did.
What the? That's brutal.
I told you it wasn't moving.
This is all for not wearing a mask. That's
This is for
fucking
not wearing
brutal.
a mask.
That's brutal. And she had told you guys that's brutal. She's flashing.
Waiting for the RCMP to get here.
They are the police. I'm sorry. Unfortunately, these guys are still police. I'm sorry, honey. You got blood on your forehead too.
Would you like to stand up?
Yeah.
We're gonna set you in the vehicle.
I can't sit in that seat. My back injury won't allow it. I'm fused. I'm going for surgery. Will you let me prove it to you?
So I went to the local swimming pool for my son's swimming lessons. And I walked in with my son. We were a few minutes late, so we rushed in. Some lady who I did not know at the time worked at the pool, stopped me and asked me for proof of my exemption to not wear a mask. I informed her that under my charter, I did not have to provide that. And quite frankly, it was wrong of her to ask me to do so. And I continued to walk past her and into the doors to the swimming pool, where at that point, you do not need to wear masks. The only place you need to wear a mask in there is right when you walk in. As soon as you get into the back side of the pool, you do not need masks. So I went into the back area. I went down to our waiting spot for his teacher. While we were down there, another lady came up to me, and at that point, standing beside the pool, was not sure why she needed to speak to me, but she proceeded to get into a confrontation with me about why I was not wearing a mask. And so she asked me again that I would need to provide proof to her that I didn't have to wear a mask. I asked her why she was harassing me since I'm at the pool and I don't need masks. She proceeded to tell me that when I left the building that I would then have to provide proof. And I basically said to her that she also needed to tell all these same parents that were there the same thing. I continued on with our swimming lessons. It was about halfway through our swimming lessons, which are only 30 minutes long, that I noticed a sheriff walk in the building. I knew at that moment that I was in trouble. I had my middle son, who's 17, was watching the swimming lessons. I went up to him, told him that a sheriff was there to speak with me and to make sure that he had his phone recording at all times, because I knew this was not going to be a peaceful conversation. We left our swimming lessons. We got out into the main foyer area. We never even changed because I knew the officer was waiting. We walked out wrapped in our towels, and he walked up to me real cocky and thumb in his pants, putting on his big black gloves or whatever, and saying, hey, hello, ma'am, how are you today? And I said to him, can we take this outside? I don't want to spread my germs. He said, sure. We walked out the door. He literally stopped right outside the door. And I said to him, can we go over by my vehicle? At this point, I'm trying everything in my power to keep this away from the public, trying to get it away from, all these kids from swimming lessons and everything. So I asked him, can we go over to my vehicle so I can put my son into the vehicle with the air conditioning and watch a movie so that he didn't have to witness it either, my youngest. He agreed. He followed me over there. On our way over there, I noticed a second peace officer get out of another vehicle and start following us. I got my son into the vehicle. I shut the door. I lit a cigarette. And then the officers decided one officer decided he needed to kind of be right in front of my face. And I said, whoa, I said, don't you need to be following the rules or the laws or something along those lines? And he says, what are you talking about? And I said, 6 feet social distancing. And he said, we're outside. We don't have to social distance. I said, yes, we do. And the other cop backed up, and this one wanted to continue the argument. And I just kind of ended it with, no, thank you. I have no desire to continue this conversation. So then basically asked me what happened. I told him kind of what happened in there. And he then proceeded to tell me that I was breaking public health orders. And I said, how? I'm standing outside. He says, well, you were breaking public health orders in the building. Then why didn't you arrest me in the building, was my comment. He then proceeded to ask me for my identification. I asked him why he needed my identification. He refused to tell me, so I refused to give it to him. I did, however, offer him a backup solution, I guess you could say. I said, you know, this is obviously my vehicle. I just put my kid into it and he's sitting in there. Feel free to run my license plate. And he said to me again, I need to see your ID. I asked him once more, no, not unless you tell me what it's for. And he then said to me, this is the last time I'm going to tell you to show me your ID before I place you under arrest. And he never even gave me a split second of a chance to even respond at that point. There was already a cuff going on my wrist. The one officer put my right hand in a cuff, just fine, put it behind my back. I had no issues with him or his handling of me. But the officer that was confrontational on the left side, I told him I had a major back injury. I'm going for surgery. He proceeded to slap the cuff on. And from the second he put the cuff on, I started screaming because he had put the cuff on sideways. So both bolts were basically on both sides of my wrist bone. Instead of it being able to turn, it was now stuck in that position. And he is trying to get me to put my arm behind my back, and that arm just doesn't go that way because of my back injury. So they put on a third pair of cuffs. At this point, I'm now under arrest, according to them, I guess, because they've got cuffs on me. I still was not told what I was under arrest for. He started walking me back towards his cruiser, and I started yelling basically that I was being placed under arrest for not wearing a mask. And my son was videotaping, and they tried to stop me. Well, they did stop my son. My 17-year-old was then cornered by the other officer to try and keep him away from me, from recording what was going on. And right away, my son was very smart. My son knew right away to tell the officer he was a minor and that he could not say anything to him or ask him any questions. And my son kind of pushed by him and joined me over by the cruiser, at which point this officer was trying to tell me I had to sit in his cruiser. I told him, looking at the seats that were in his back seat, I said, there's no way physically that my back will allow me to sit that way. It doesn't work. It just doesn't, like, you'll break me to do it, right? And he told me, and the words I will never forget, he told me that he could not force me into his vehicle. So at that point, my son was trying to get proof of my medical to him. And the one cop reached over my son's shoulder and literally stole my license out of my phone that my son was holding. I started thrashing to get them to let go. At this point, I'd still been screaming constantly about my wrist being broken. And that is the point where I was thrown to the ground. Injuries or no injuries, it didn't matter. I was thrown to the ground, at what point they then called the RCMP and said that I had assaulted them. One officer said that I had swung and missed. Again, I remind you, my hands were behind my back in handcuffs and I was on the ground. So he said I swung and missed at him, and the other officer told the RCMP that I had kicked him, and that's why they put me to the ground. I was never asked by the RCMP what really went down. To this day, I have never given my story to anybody. Not even them. There's been no investigation. There's been no, how did this happen? Nothing. The officers then picked me up. They threw me in the back of their cop car. They were nice enough to put the handcuffs in the front for me so that I could physically adjust myself into the car with my back. And then they wouldn't let my husband do anything. They wouldn't look at the videos. At one point, one officer, I told my husband as they were putting me in the car, I said, whatever you do not let my phone out of your hands for nothing. Nothing. You make sure that phone stays in your hands. And once he threw me in the cop car and closed the door, and the first thing he did was went up to my husband and said, can I see her phone? I'd like to see the video. My husband said, you'll see it in court like everyone else. And that's when the officer said, well, this isn't going to court. Okay, then like my husband said, and excuse my language, but then get my wife out of that vehicle now.
Yeah.
If this is not going to court, what in the hell is she doing in the back of a cop car? And so the cop came back, sat in his car. He had the door open. This is the RCMP officer. And the peace officers, the two peace officers that started everything, came up to the police car with the door open and cameras running, I hope, because they're supposed to be, said to the RCMP officer, well, she didn't really kick me, but she intended to. So then at that point, that was when the officer then took me and we drove away. My youngest son standing there crying, not knowing not knowing why they were taking me because I had done nothing wrong. And of course, because I watched that on my son's face, it put me into a huge panic attack. We weren't even out of the park yet, and I was already having major issues with breathing, and my panic attack was getting worse. And the officer refused to pull over, help me in any way, call EMS. At no point, I had bystanders that were, after they pushed me to the ground and saw my head bleeding and my broken wrist and everything else, I had bystanders screaming at them, you need to phone an ambulance. I was never asked if I wanted one. EMS was never called to the scene. The officer continued to drive while I was having a full-blown asthma attack at this point. In our town, we have a major construction issue going on the main road. And rather than take the back way to the police station, he literally drove, while I was having an asthma attack, he literally drove right into the heart of backed up traffic. I remember at least 2 different times gasping for air and almost like waking up out of a blackout state. And all I can remember is the officer just continuously telling me to just breathe, just breathe, just breathe. I knew one day that standing up for my rights was going to get me in trouble. I never in a million years thought that that's the kind of trouble you get for standing up for your rights. I was taken to the cop shop, placed on a bench. And the weirdest thing, while I was sitting on this bench now, at this point, I've gotten out of the cop car and able to get some fresh air, and I've been able to calm myself down enough to, like, he let me stand out there for a few minutes to catch my breath or whatever. He brought me in and he told me that I was going to be going into cells, that had I ever been in cells before, and blah, blah, blah. And I answered no questions to him whatsoever. From the second he put me in his cop car, I answered nothing.
Smart.
And then he got this phone call. The main desk in the cell area, they got a phone call for him, and he got on the phone and he just told me to sit on this bench. And he was like talking in like some of their code numbers, and he was doing a lot of, yeah, well, it was just the strangest thing. And then all of a sudden I went from being in cells overnight to see a judge in the morning to being put in a telephone room and released within an hour and a half with these ridiculous charges of assaulting a peace officer. And when I asked, how can I be charged for something that he straight up told you I did not do? He says, but you intended to, and intent is just as guilty as doing it. So now I sit with assaulting a peace officer and resisting, right, that's the other one. Resisting arrest, obstructing a peace officer, and assault on a peace officer.
So you've got 3 pretty serious charges against you. All for, I guess at the end of the day, just taking your son to go swimming. What were the physical impacts of this arrest on you? What did you end up physically? How were you harmed?
I had a pretty large wound on my head from when they pushed me to the ground. I bruised, banged up knees. I had to go through multiple tests and testings and stuff for my left wrist. They thought that it may have been broken. So I ended up having to go to the hospital. After they released me, I went straight to the hospital, and I had to wear a brace or a half cast for a while. And then I had to have a reset of x-rays done. And then I had to wear the splint for longer, and then ended up having to go for a CAT scan to verify to make sure that there wasn't anything underneath that was broken, because it was tough to see with the swelling. My left leg is still screwed to this day. I still have multiple shooting pains go through my left leg. My right hip has never felt the same since, and my back injury is 10 times worse. I take more medication now than I've ever taken before, and they just get away with it. I was also banned from the swimming pool. I was also banned from the park that surrounds the swimming pool. And I also have a restraining order put against me by the 2 peace officers, but I can't put one against them. So in other words, what that means, and I asked to make sure I understood, was that at any given time, the same cop who assaulted me can stop me for any reason, and I can't do a damn thing about it, because he has every right as an officer. I can't go up to him and talk to him in any shape, way, or form, or come in within 100 yards or whatever it is of his home or his vehicle or his family or anything. But he can still stop me and arrest me and do whatever he wants.
And you never physically harmed him. They just say that you intended to harm him, which you didn't do, but you were physically harmed by them. And
yes, ma'am.
Let's also not forget the other victims in all of this, your kids. What about the impacts on your kids in all of this? Your son obviously can no longer go swimming. I understand that's very important to him. He can't do that anymore. What was it like for your family to witness this happening to you?
It's been embarrassing. It's been hard. I've lost family members who won't talk to me because of it. I have a lot that support me, but I have a lot more that they were embarrassed to see it when it started getting posted everywhere, right? Like, there's no privacy, obviously, and I understand that. I understand the world needs to know what's going on, but like, my son, one of his favorite places is the spray park, and we can't go.
Yeah.
We can't go because I'm not allowed. Because for the 7th time, this whole incident is ridiculous. I had gone to swimming lessons 6 times prior to this day, never once wearing a mask, never once being asked to wear a mask. And in all reality, when she called the sheriff, I was doing nothing wrong at that moment either, because I was not required to wear a mask at poolside. So I just feel like I just don't trust anything anymore. I literally, I see a cop car, I go into a panic attack. I see him all the time. It's like a never ending relive it over and over and over again every time I see him. And I can't do anything about it. There's nothing.
You know, and it's got to make your kids not trust cops. We tell our kids that cops are the good guys, that if you're in trouble, you go to them. And they just witnessed this happen to their mom at a place that they love.
Yeah. Yeah, very much so. We take our dogs there. That's one of our favorite places to have ever been. And now we'll never go there. Never.
I'm so sorry to hear just the absolute ringer that you've been put through physically and emotionally, but likewise your family. And that's why I'm so happy to be able to offer you some help to fight these criminal charges in court. You know, normally we fight tickets. We very rarely take on criminal cases. We only take on the most outrageous, and yours is truly an outrageous one. And I think you need all the help that you can get. We're going to take care of all the legal costs. We'll do that through crowdfunding, through fightthefines.com. We've got a really great lawyer working really hard for you, Chad Williamson from Williamson Law. He's one of the best in the business. You've got a real fighter on your side, but I think you need it because I think you're up against some serious charges and some vindictive cops.
Very much so. I couldn't agree more. And I can't thank Rebel News enough. I mean, I was happy to hear that they would help me with the original ticket. But then when I got the email that they're going to help with the criminal charges, it was just like, it just made it all okay for a minute. Yeah. And I can't thank Rebel News enough at all. And I just really hope that the more of us that keep standing up, no matter what the consequences end up being, I've always told my children, we were born free, we live free, and we die free. And I refuse. And my kids support me hugely in what happened because they believe the same thing. That's what I raised them to believe. You should have freedom of movement. You should have freedom of liberty. And this is not, there was no reason for it to go that far whatsoever. There was no reason whatsoever.
Yeah, it sounds like these cops need to be taught a lesson in court, and I'm happy to be a part of making them learn it. But we couldn't do it without the support of everybody at home. And I'm sure when they see this, you're going to have a lot of moral support coming your way, because I know it's been very tough for you in your community. Like you say, some of your own family are embarrassed because of what happened to you instead of empathetic, but I'll do my best not to judge. But I think you're going to have a lot of moral support from a lot of people that you don't know who are just cheering for you to have a little bit of justice.
Lots of love back. Thank you so much.
After I heard Miranda's story, I knew we had to do everything we could to help her. She was traumatized. Her kids were traumatized. She felt like she couldn't even live in her town anymore. Maybe I couldn't fix the emotional harm that she underwent, but I knew through your donations to fightthefines.com, we could put her in touch with the best lawyer for the job to at least lift that legal burden off her shoulders. And Chad Williamson, well, he did it. Here's Chad with the good news.
Chalk up another one for the good guys. Thanks to the generous support of gracious donors, we've slayed another dragon in the name of freedom. This time our client, Miranda Gazier. And this was no ordinary dragon. Most of our Fight the Fines clients receive regulatory charges. These are like fines, tickets, or whatever you want to call them. Miranda, on the other hand, was charged under the Criminal Code of Canada for resisting arrest and assaulting a peace officer. We've secured the withdrawal of these serious charges against Miranda, due in part perhaps to not only the reprehensible circumstances that gave rise to these charges, but also likely due to the robust charter notice we filed, outlining a number of egregious breaches of our client's charter rights. I won't go into great detail, but essentially our client was in the aquatic center in Lloydminster with her son in swimming lessons. Clearly she was not wearing a mask in the pool. Yeah, of course not. I'm sure there's a couple people out there who would wear masks in pools, but normal folk might question their sanity. A peace officer, of course, arrived to investigate an alleged public health infraction and asked Miranda to get out of the pool. Miranda asked if she could speak to the officer outside and put her son in the car prior to being interrogated so that her son wouldn't have to witness this interrogation. So they go outside. Miranda's still in a bathing suit and a towel, and the officer begins interrogating Miranda, asking whether she's got a mask exemption. She was outside. Pretty sure you don't need to wear a mask either in the swimming pool or in a parking lot. Now, suffice to say, the situation escalated rather quickly and resulted in two officers manhandling Miranda in front of her son, all over this mask debacle. Miranda continually called out during the scuffle that she was in pain due to a previous and serious back injury. At no time was she advised of her rights to counsel or her right to remain silent. When it was over, she had sustained injuries to her forehead and her knees from the pavement she hit when the officers threw her down. Miranda was illegally and arbitrarily arrested and detained. She was denied her right to counsel, and worse, she was subjected to cruel and unusual punishment at the hands of these two officers. She was physically abused, and this was a complete disgrace. The good news is justice has been served. More ridiculous charges bite the dust, and the jackbooted public health dragon has had a taste of righteous retribution.
The relief that Miranda's family is experiencing right now, not being subject to these ridiculous criminal charges, is only possible because of you at home. I'm the one who sometimes hears the thank yous, but you're the ones who really deserve it for making a difference and helping strangers when they don't think anybody cares. Now, there are 2,200 other people in the Fight the Fines project still waiting for their good news that Miranda and her family just got. If you would like to help them by donating to offset their legal fees, please donate at fightthefines.com, and all donations there qualify for a charitable tax receipt. Thank you again for making this happen. For Rebel News, I'm Sheila Gunn Reid. If you'd like to support people like Miranda and her family, people who have received lockdown infractions, and in Miranda's case, criminal charges for just living their lives normally, please donate today at fightthefines.com, and all donations there now qualify for a charitable tax receipt from the registered Canadian charity, the Democracy Fund.